All right, so let's get started for today. Today I'm going to be taking a look at some 14-day challengers. So I'll be taking a look at this piece, as well as this piece. We're talking about all the things you guys have done wrong, how to just throw you back on the straight path towards improvement. But before I get started, I want to announce that this piece, my latest illustration, will be available for apprentices on Patreon. And what I will be doing is going through all the major stages. That's why I've grouped most of it. All the major stages of the process, how I built this entire scene, what I delayed, what I worked on, the different stages of detailing, blocking, and it's all recorded. So it will be, you get access to this PSD, and you get access to the full time-lapse video, as well as the commentary. So all the major junctions, all the points that I had to cross, the lines I crossed to get to different levels of development, and what mistakes were made, and how I learned from them. So usually a lot of my thoughts come later. I could get into a lot of detail about the process. While I'm painting, I don't like teaching because I just like chilling and laughing with my viewers. But while I do this commentary, I really do go in depth into my thinking process, kind of like the inner Istebrak in my brain that made all these decisions subconsciously or unconsciously. They become narrated, and I go through what I worried about, what decision I made, what liberties I took outside of the reference, all of that. So if you're interested in that process, if you're interested in creating detail like this in your work, if you're interested in portraiture and all of that, and you want to be a portraiture specialist, and it's something you want to develop in your portfolio, since character art is really important in portfolios, learning the intricacies of portraits is so important, but also it never ends. There's so much to learn about portraits. It will never be over, and there's always something else you forgot. So that's really what the majority of my rewards on Patreon for apprentices come from. There's also the assignments on the apprenticeship Discord. I give out assignments every single month. But again, a big part of the rewards is the personal work that I do, and the PSDs and the brushes I use for this, and the time-lapse video, as well as a critique of the homework you do on Discord. So it's a lot of educational material for just $20. And I really do appreciate anybody who joins and hops on Patreon, even for the $1 watcher. If you learn anything from today's class and you want to give back, I'd really appreciate if you guys joined in as a $1 patron. That's just $12 a year for all this educational content that my channel offers. And my channel needs you right now because it's going through some really, really bad limitations brought on by YouTube changes. And it'll make all the difference if you guys hop on and help support the channel. But for those who want something a little bit more, there's always the educational material in between watcher and apprenticeship tier. You do get the for $10 a month, you get the time lapse and you get the PSD. You don't get brushes, and you don't get the assignments and the homework and the critique if you're an initiate, but you do get the PSD and the portraiture information and all of that. So I'll see you guys on Patreon if you are joining, and almost lost this copy of this entire PSD. It's insane. But thank God I found it. And so let's get started on this stuff. Actually, before I do get started, some people ask, so make sure that if you are interested in joining the 14-day challenge, Istebrak, where do I get my critique? You get it at istebrak.com, click on the Reddit icon here. This is where you could submit your work for the 14-day challenge if you're interested in starting one. And this is where you get critique, because a big part of the 14-day challenge, half the challenge, is getting the critique. Because you have to have some kind of something telling you where your mistakes are. You can't do it alone, or else you're working in a vacuum of your own habits and mistakes, and your 14th day almost always looks nothing like you desired. So in just 14 attempts, you can be the portrait artist you want to be, but you have to make sure that you are being smart about it. You're getting critique, and you're giving critique, and you're keeping the dialogue up. A big part of improvement is being a part of a community. And I think that's it for announcements. Portrait Studio is still on sale for those who are interested in purchasing it. It'll be available here. And a small little announcement, I will be selling specialized tutorials to download from my website. They're tutorials outside of what I usually do on my YouTube channel, which are full length and kind of all encompassing between different students. These are actual tutorials, step-by-step processes of a portrait, step-by-step process of like Istebrak approved anime realism, and step-by-step process of eyes, nose, mouth, all of that, as if you took a specialized course with me. But it'll be available on my website sometime within the next 6 months or so. And it's full in-depth eye tutorials, mouth tutorial, nose tutorial, portrait, face, three-quarter view, side view, all of the stuff that you guys look for, detailed, in-depth, in my teaching style, of course. And it'll be available in my store for you guys to purchase. That's it. Let's get started. So I'm going to go step by step from most unfinished to most finished. So it'll be kind of like, you know, one thing leads to learning the mistakes of the other portrait. So this piece is, it has a lot of issues with it, mostly because I fear the student is working way too closely with their Portrait Studio reference or another model reference they may have. The biggest mistake you guys are making with your 14-day challenge submissions is that you guys are forgetting to, sorry, 1 second, forgot to switch my tablet. You guys are forgetting to make the background a different value. This background value and this portrait are exactly the same, and that's not acceptable. So I'm going to separate the two together, because if you were doing a form study, would you make the background and the form study the same value? No. So, you know, you're not going to do that with a portrait. So this is Cora's, I believe. It's a good opportunity to show, you know, what's happening here and how to correct it. You guys can see everything, right? Prepares to be roasted. And so yeah, I think it's really exciting, those specialized lessons I'll have on my website. I think they'll come in handy for those students who don't want to look through my YouTube channel and don't want to have to like sift through all of the critiquing and just get a focused lesson that isn't necessarily the same commitment that comes with tutoring, and you know, all the homework and stuff like that. It is a bit more on the expensive side since it's my entire knowledge pool poured into tutorials, but I think it's a way less expensive than tutoring, and just brings the convenience of the lesson right to your lap. So it's a little bit easier to access, and you can get started on improving and detailing and all of that. So it'll be fun, I think, also making them, because I get to just talk about it, and it only just gets more and more and more enriched. So in the class, I only have an hour to teach a student, whereas in these kinds of tutorials, I have as much time as I want. So I'm raising the background value a little bit and darkening the character a little bit. And we really want to create that distinction. Once that's done, you need to start cleaning up. The next step in this correction and the next step in your 14-day challenge when you start yours is make sure you have good symmetries. Make sure you're figuring things out where you're placing everything. So all the red lines right now, all right, all the red lines are proportion lines. They are where things are supposed to be on a face if you were drawing a, you know, pretty average beauty face. These are the beauty lines that you need to have. So your beauty is non-existent at the moment, mostly because the eyes are perfectly flat. The nose is great, but the symmetry is off, as you can see. It could be due to the fact that this eye is further to the left than it needs to be, and the mouth is way too wide for a neutral mouth. When she smiles, her smile must reach out here. So you have good beauty all around. I think you have a good idea of what you're doing. So I'm just creating this triangle over here. It does touch on, you know, everything seems to be fitting inside and the eyes are wide enough. It's a very pleasing face, apart from the flat eyes, which have neutralized the gender, so we don't really know if it's androgynous, if it's female or male. It's really androgynous. So these are the lines you're supposed to be figuring out. You can draw them after you just draw a basic egg shape. And then so from there, those are the things I'm correcting right now. Those are the things I'm doing. So a lot of the time when I'm critiquing, you guys don't see the lines in my mind. The lines are floating in there telling me what to raise and what to lower and what to move around. And the reason those lines exist in my mind is because I've done this for so long, and I've used lines for so long that now I can't unsee them, and they're everywhere. And so that's the same thing is going to happen to you once you start measuring a little bit more. And so good job on the nose. I think all the practice you've put into the nose, Cora, has come through. And you actually have a really great set of nostrils. What a weird compliment to tell someone. Your nostrils are great. I have said that to someone, believe it or not. Of course. Oh man. And so I'm gonna just lower the inner corners. And things only artists say. Your nostrils are great. Love the curl in them, love the size, so expressive. Love how they flare up when you get mad. Now it's getting romantic. So let me take a look at the before, after. All right, so a little bit less skewed, a little bit less, he looks a little high here, kind of just drifting off into nothing. Here we have a bit more of a concrete kind of beauty visible. So those are the things that I was mentioning before, Cora, that you really need to get down. You can't do these mistakes anymore. You really need to get these down because you've done the same mistake for a while now. So either write them down or pre-map them out. The corners of the mouth supposed to line up with the pupils. Not necessarily. They're supposed to be within the line or at or slightly with the inner corner, just as long as you're not doing a smile. It's a very average placement for the mouth. You can make them even smaller than this, even less wide than this. You just have to make sure that the mouth isn't too big. Too small, you kind of get away with it because beauty, you know, a lot of female beauty over time, classic beauty, has worked with a small mouth. I think Betty Boop. Obviously, we're not all using that makeup style anymore, but you're allowed to have smaller mouths for beauty, more so, and are allotted more of an exaggeration, permissible than a wide mouth, which is always associated with a monster or a creature or something like that. So make sure you're not accidentally giving your character a monster mouth. And then apart from that, I think the shadows on the lower part of the face are a little strong, and all of your edges, all of your edges are weak. You need to block, and you need to just stop using soft brush because there's a lot of bleeding. Tons and tons and tons of softness everywhere. Areas where you should not have any, you have a soft edge. That all needs to be corrected. Make sure your illustration is big enough. So these areas here need a much stronger edge. And the way you know that your canvas is too small, I mean, I don't think people have bad computers anymore. When I first started out, nobody's computer could run a 5,000 by 5,000 width canvas. That was the stuff of dreams back when I was like 18. But now computers are much stronger than they used to be, so you should be able to get at least 3,000 by 3,000 easy, so you can get the most out of my brushes, which have been made with a 3,000 by 3,000 pixel canvas. Cast shadow is a little too sharp, too dark, and then even though I like the mouth blended, I just don't like seeing the dark value of the mouth, which is basically the blood or the pigment, bleeding out too soon. And you kind of really are missing a great deal of edges. And that's because maybe you are working a little too closely with a blended reference. The Portrait Studio reference is there for the students who know how to read it. If it's too much information and you don't know how to read it, stop using the realistic reference and start using the polygonal reference for Portrait Studio. And also use them in tandem with real people's faces. Don't just rely on these super edited models of portraits that are really there just to help students find where shadows go. They're not there to be a beacon of anatomy knowledge. It's just one model and one type of face, and one really super neutral face I made super neutral on purpose so that people can use them for any type of character. But please make sure that you're actually working with real to life references as much as you can. Fill that pool of knowledge with more edge work awareness and all of that. Tiny little pocket shadow for here. So this is definitely a step in the right direction now, since you have a little less muck everywhere and we can actually see where the character, now that I've blocked out where the mouth will go, I blend out the edge, but I'm not trying to create a bleed of the mouth as pigment everywhere. And I'm just raising the mouth out of that shadow that it's in and using a lighter value to show the value change. So another announcement mid-class, if you are interested, ignore the title and recovered thrice with a side of fish. If you are interested in learning how I did this portrait, all the ins and outs, all the decisions I made, full time lapse will be uploaded to apprentice tier patrons, and you get the whole PSD, you get the brushes I used for it, and you get basically everything that went into this. So you can flip through the PSD while you watch the time lapse, and the time lapse is full commentary by myself, and I talk about every major stage and what occurred and what happened, what I was thinking about, what to look out for if you're going to try to recreate the same thing. And of course you have the brushes to recreate it with. All right, moving on. So let me show you the before and after. And honestly, actually, before I do that, I just want to push your contrast even more, because your contrast was just way too safe, and you really need a little less safety when it comes to your contrast, because like I raised the value of the background so much and it's still down here. You're allowed to have a background that's still, you know, that's pretty high up, because you're supposed to be showing contrast and supposed to be examining this face in a lab environment. You need lights to run a lab, so you need to be able to see your character. Stop painting these moody backgrounds for your 14-day challenge. So stop painting moody backgrounds for 14-day challenge. Write that back then. Before, after, your character is extremely blended into the background, and you have a lot more to go, a lot further to go. The next lineup of values comes from your highlights and your highlighter midtones. So basically pre-highlight midtones that are slightly lighter but not necessarily highlights, and those come from let me flip back to that. Those come from your soft brush on radial shading, you know, geared to radial shading, and some blocking in all of these little areas. So a large blocker for the pre-highlighter midtone. The nose gets a bit of a block. You really try to bring out this nose as much as you can, just like that. Blocking out the surface, blocking out those highlighters on the mouth, blocking out the chin, not like this because the chin doesn't glow. Don't do that again. It's like this. Only the upper part of the sphere, the upper part of any sphere in this entire system, is the only thing that's illuminated. So half the head is in light, half the chin is in light, and it's always the upper half. A little bit here. Please do include the eyebrows. At this stage, you still need to practice where to place them and all the beauty that's anchored through them. And it's well on its way to becoming a recognizable face. After that, I suggest, if you feel safe enough or ready enough, add the lash line, make sure that's nice and dark, and start introducing the blacker tones around the eyes. And you're almost there. You have a great plate. You're just really shy of bigger changes. You're kind of just repeating what you know over and over and over and over again, Cora. Try to push what you know a little bit further. Only one step into the unknown each time. It doesn't have to be 50 steps into the unknown. It just has to be one step. You can't stay painting where you already know where there's light, because you're never going to get anywhere like that. You can't just keep painting what you know just so you could feel safe about it. Start a new painting, paint what you know. Start a new painting, paint what you know. You're never going to get anywhere. Make sure you're pushing yourself a little bit further each and every single time. For this piece, same issues. You are no longer allowed. You are hereby banished from the world of pupils and iris. Another huge beginner mistake with 14-day challenges. You are not allowed to use that anymore, because your usage of that has completely destroyed the way you've approached the anatomy of the eyes everywhere else. Eyes are hard to draw, I understand. Eyes have a lot of rules, and that's why when I'm doing these exclusive, not the specialized classes, I'm gonna, just put eyes on one video, because there's so much that goes into understanding eyes. It's probably gonna be a 2 or 3 hour lesson just for eyes. So when it comes to eyes, because there's so much involved, don't paint the pupil and the iris. Leave them out. They do not change the way we look at the structure of the eye. They are not part of the structure of the eye. Write that back to me. The structure of the eye is what's beautiful about the eye, not the pupil and the iris. Ask a beginner, what's so beautiful about eyes? Oh, it's the sparkles and the color in the pupils and the iris, and it's all about that specular light. No, that's a beginner answer, because that is the illusion. A real artist would tell you, a professional will tell you that the beauty about the eye is managing the curvature of the eyeball under the malleability of the skin. That is just such a beautiful way, the way that they merge together, and the way that the folds of the eyes taper so gently from pure black line to subtle, very subtle gradient that's extremely soft. These are what make eyes beautiful in a painting. So I applied the beauty marker here, as well as getting rid of the pupil in the iris. I'll take care of everything else. But when I'm talking about this piece, which I will talk about here, what made this portrait beautiful, believe it or not, isn't the iris and the pupil. Those were decided later on, and the details were added later. It's the fold in her eye that had me just go crazy. I just had to work with this reference. I had to work with this piece, and it's the folds and the under eyelids that I added. It's the little structural changes here and there. Those are the things that make me go, oh, I have to draw this face. It's not the sparkles in the pupil and the iris. It is the surrounding structure that lets the pupil and the iris sparkle. So stop doing this thing where you're rushing laws of nature, and you're trying to use your little evolve what is that in Pokemon, the little evolve stone, to try to level up really quickly by over glamorizing the pupils in the eye. It's not good. Don't do that. Level up naturally. Stay away from the pupil and the iris, and focus all of your attention on the structure of the eye, the skin, the balance between a solid surface and skin surface. And then another beginner mistake you're making here is the value sharing. If you don't know what value sharing is, look it up on my video history. And you guys have an entire index available to you in my channel. Just use it, please. Again, you have issues with blocking, please don't apply values for the skin, for the nose, without blocking them in first. Don't block in with soft brush. I know it seems like common sense. Why use a circular tool to bring in blocks? Why try to make a brick using a circular marker? It just doesn't work. A circular mold, it's not possible. It's not physically logical. Use a brick, my hard round brush, and the number 2, and use it to block in your little structures. This little brick right here is happy little helper. and block everything in that you need to, because the head is a building, the face is a building. That's the most important thing you need to understand. Is that it's an accumulation of different cubes and geometric shapes added together in response to the light. It's not a face before it's a building. It's a building before it's a face. The sides of the head are really dark, and I think the whole portrait could use its own skin tone, just like I did before, just a collective drop in the value. Select inverse. So just drop the whole thing down and start working your way up. Yes, okay, it's a little too dark. That's because it's a friendly dark for your midtones to build off of. Now you have a place to build from. You don't have to worry too much about it starting bright, and you still have to add brights, and then you're just not gonna have, you're gonna have a light bulb in the end. You're not gonna have a head, you're gonna have a light bulb. We don't want that. We want a believable head shape. And I'm just blocking in some of these little areas. I'm making sure that the beard shadow is structurally sound, that only half the head is in shadow. And I'm making sure that the mouth is also under that shadow, doing its thing. Okay, and then half the chin, not the whole chin, half the chin is in light, like every other sphere in this scene. How do I know how to work with spheres and scenes? Oh, do form studies, please. Do form studies. Don't assume that you can, don't attempt this without form studies, and don't assume you'll do this without form studies. Form studies is it's learning how to walk. It's basics. It's basic structure. It's part of learning how to blend and learn how to render a sphere. Learn how to render a cube. If you don't have that, if you didn't trigger that little knowledge way of seeing things in your brain, you're not going to be able to work with reference. You're not going to be able to work without reference. Either will be stolen from you, or you'll steal it from yourself if you deny your brain the form studies. Don't do that. Don't do that. You need to know how to render a cube in light in order for you to read a cube in light that is slightly blended in a reference, and render a cube from light when you have no reference and the cube is floating around in your imagination. To help you create a face. So now I'm just gonna blend with a smudge brush. It's also available on my store if you guys are interested in my smudge brush. I use it extremely heavily in my painting process, just because I want to keep my painting process as similar to sketching as possible, and I smudge, and I don't really color pick when I'm using sketching and traditional stuff, so I always color pick. I always smudge. Now someone's gonna quote that. So that's why I brought that back into digital. And then I'm gonna leave a little shadow, a soft shadow in between the eyebrows to show the dip in the nose before it becomes the nose. And then a little light right here. And then I'm gonna go into smudging out the rest. So smudging, and it's scatter smudges, just like we would if we were hand smudging, kind of jittering the hand. To smudge a little bit. Shaped out the eyes, smudging the inside of the lower eyelid and the outside, but not the middle, to keep that edge intact. And then smudging out the cheeks. Now that it's circular, things are a little bit more structured and ready to go. And then you don't have any good cylinders for your upper and lower lips. Make sure the lips look cylindrical, and you'll be ready for your next day. Right, make sure you have all those light pockets as well. So I'm just speed running through this. I am sorry if I'm not covering every one of your questions, but I'm definitely covering the most critical things, critical mistakes you guys are making. And you notice how much mistakes you guys make with the background value. It's really crazy. And considering how long I've just tried to make sure you guys stop value sharing, you guys still value share. I've covered it in so many videos, but it's just a natural mistake because it comes from the place in your mind that learned the word for nose, which drew things with a line. So you value share the sides of the nose because you think you're not going to have a nose unless you use shadows on the side of the nose because, oh, the nose is not going to be visible enough for the viewer. Give your viewer some credit. They're smart enough to know they're looking at a nose. They see noses every single day in the world around them. They can tell when they're looking at a nose. You don't need to give us little guides here, little strips here, so that we could see, okay, this is where the nose is designated. We don't need extra definition for the nose. We're fine. And then I'm going to blend out the edges of the mouth. And then blend out around the mouth as well, and then blend out those 2 blocks I brought in for the nostrils. A lot left to do, but definitely moving in the right direction now. And you can see how beneficial changing the value of the object totally, just like you would a form study. Stop using lines on shadows on the sides of the head. Another example of a student that's line dependent. This is line dependency right here. Shadows on the side of the nose and shadows on the sides of the head means that you still think that we're not going to know what we're looking at without lines, because right now, instead of giving us a flat object with its own value and its own structural integrity through its edges, you are giving us a so let me finish that. So let me just throw a random shadow here. Instead of trusting us that we're seeing this solid value right here, you are giving us this value, this object. You are throwing shadows over it, hoping that we can see this object. Hey, we see it. You know, we already see it, but no, you're doing that. Because you did that, your brain didn't feel like it was necessary to add any more dimension. So you don't need the lines on the side of the object, and all you need is the edge that's super clean. That's all you ever needed. But you guys make this common mistake, and it's gonna happen. It's part of the way we were taught our language, and that's the struggle of artists, that we will always be undoing what our brain has learned hitherto. It's difficult, right? That's what makes art difficult. And then finally, this piece, a little bit of mistakes similar to the ones we just saw. So even though you may understand, sorry, dumbass truck just drove by. So even though you understand, beauty, and you learned a little bit more about detailing, you're still making some of the mistakes that we saw beginner students make today. This will happen. It will always happen. You will always be fighting line dependence wherever you go. Your edges are still a little bit weak. You see how similar every mistake is. Let me just connect her. All right, so weak edges, we need to darken the character and lighten the background. Making sure the background is light enough. And select inverse, and I'm just gonna lighten the character just a little bit more, actually. Drop the values down with black. So I'm separating the background from the object, exaggerating it just a little bit, just to make sure you guys see what I'm doing, and making sure no values used above the upper half of the sphere. This upper half of the sphere are used on the lower half or even on the middle line. All right, and your edges, weak edges. The sides of the nostrils are so soft. What movie is that quote from? So weak. So weak. It's like a fight. It's just stuck in my head now. That's the GIF I'd use. So weak. Your edges are so weak. If you were not dumb, write that back. And then I'm sharpening this, and what the edges reveal is that, whether or not you value shared. So it's pretty obvious that you did. And this shadow down here, I mean, it's not bad. The shadow down here needs to be more defined. I wish I could play GIFs while critiquing. It's so fun. And Spider-Man. Maybe, yeah, it is Spider-Man. And a little dollop of shadow there above the nose. Yeah, I think Goblin does say that. You're right. What a perfect GIF this would be. I love Willem Dafoe's Goblin. Oh man, dude, I'd crush on that. You know me and villains. So I'm just like strengthening the edges here and adding a little bit of edge control here, just making sure the upper lip gets the light it needs. Once you blend it, it'll make sense. Don't be immature. Don't be like, oh, it looks like shit while blocked. It has to look good while painting. It has, what I block in has to look good, or else I'm just not doing this. It's really vain to think like that. It's extremely vain to assume that without your painting, like your painting, you're not gonna block because it doesn't look good. And believe me, or believe it or not, students do this. They don't like the look of blocking, and it deters them from ever doing it, which is so silly because it's literally gonna appease your vanity eventually, because it's gonna make things look better. But I've seen all kinds of stuff, and one of the biggest things is that they just don't like how the painting looks and feels while they're blocking, which is so sad, because blocking is so awesome. So yeah, it looks messy, but look at what we got in the end. We blend out with a larger smudge brush for fatty areas, and a smaller smudge brush for bonier, more areas full of cartilage. So larger for fattier and smaller for bonier. All right, so a bit more structure all around. So yes, these were speed critiques, but they're definitely focusing on the more critical decisions and the mistakes the student has made, and kind of trying to deter any more mistakes along the similar path. Just re-edging, re-blocking this. I feel like I went too light. So I'll show you the before and after. Before, after. So you had that outline on the side of the head, which you thought you didn't have, but you do. And though it's elusive and it widened and it lightened, it doesn't trick me, because I've seen it before. You guys think you can trick me with your little wide, light lines? You're still using lines. I need to see that you've used a block, a real block of value, while painting. Though this painting has a lot more to it that's needed. For instance, the forehead needs a lot more brightness, and the top of the head, I need to take my time with the blocking and redo it. It's more of a structured surface now, because you've got a consistent value that's no longer a line. All right, and if you feel like the sides of the head need to be, well, you definitely need to make sure that you're understanding a sphere, that you know what a sphere does in top-down light. Once you do that, your highlighters won't speak like midtones, and your shadows won't speak like midtones. And you won't have that gross level of contrast, that really nasty contrast where you're either painting with black or painting with white, and you really don't understand the necessity for midtone. That will go away once you do more form studies. All right, so it's more of a solid structure and a slight peak for the brow bone, instead of a line on the sides of the brow bone, as if she's a Klingon or whatever, whatever that species is in Star Trek with the big ass forehead. It's just a girl you're drawing. It's not an alien creature, so give her human anatomy. So lots of stuff. We covered a lot of stuff. We covered making sure that your background value is very different from the value of your painting. Make sure you keep the sphere intact. Make sure that you're not attempting to push the rendering further by bringing in these lines or shadows and attempt to create some kind of definition. The edge will do the definition for you. This is a culmination of both issues. The background value is not great, and the edges were not great. Those are just a bit too soft, and your values are dispersed, and you were using a line to attempt to create definition. Even though your features are good, it's not a thorough critique, but it's enough to focus on the critical issues you guys were facing. Your spheres are suffering. Write that back to me. You guys need to do some form studies ASAP. So thank you everyone for coming to today's critique. If you want your stuff critiqued, go to istebrak.com and click on the Reddit icon here. It'll take you to the Reddit. If you want to embark on the 14-day challenge and you don't know where to start, go to the community tab and scroll down on my website, and you'll have all the questions answered about the 14-day challenge. If you guys still have questions, you can always submit a form submission. And challenges will be up soon, community challenges. It's just been really rough booking everybody back in and starting the fall curriculum for private tutoring. So once I get everything in place, it'll just be smooth sailing. We'll be doing a lot of fun fall themed, Halloween themed community challenges, which I hope you guys join, because it's always fun when a variety of submissions are critiqued make it to the video. Portrait Studio is on sale here. And if you are interested in supporting on Patreon, if you learned something from today's class, please do join as just a watcher. That's just $1 a month. I've been teaching since like 2013. And I've had a goal for 1,000 $1 watchers for a really long time. I hope I can make it. If you have used Patreon before, if you've considered, now is a good time to come support the community. But if you are interested in higher tiers, there's the $20 apprentice tier, which comes with all that educational material I covered today, including my latest painting, commentary, brushes, how to use my brushes and how I've used them in the painting, and the decisions I made in my latest painting. So thank you guys for coming. I'll see you guys on Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Bye guys.